What's up internet, Criddle here with this week's chapter of Fairy Tail, number 490, Fairy Tail 0. I was going to do the Omake chapter and then the actual chapter for this week, but that was overkill on the fan service and dick jokes, so yeah, there's not a lot to analyse there. With that in mind, let's get on to this week's chapter. So we pick up with Eileen having just used Universe 1 with no cover page this week, and the on-screen text of "On that day, Fior was engulfed by light. What finally emerged beyond that gleaming light was..." Brought to you by Mangastream. Next page is a flashback to the series Fairy Tail 0 with the dialogue between Mavis and Zera when Mavis realized that Zera was only an illusion she had created for herself. Zera asks Mavis if she knows where fairies live. She responds, "Within my heart." Zera comes back to that with, "Then what about me?" Mavis has a look of realization, and then we have the simple text, "This isn't goodbye." Mavis wakes up from what appears to be a dream in the collapsing basement of the Fairy Tail Guild. She calls out for Kana, but there's no sign of her. Mavis struggles to the exit, noting that her body still won't move the way she wants. She calls out for Kana again, and then snaps her fingers and creates clothes for herself. She comments that she can, at the very least, use magic, and makes note that the clothes are just an illusion. Mavis gets out of the basement to find, well, nothing. The guild is completely empty. She comments that everything was just enveloped in light and begins to ponder that when suddenly, Zeref sits within the guild, waiting for Mavis. Mavis is obviously shocked to see Zeref there, but he is quite happy, a smug look on his face. Mavis snaps out of this, asking what Zeref has done with the guild, fearing the worst. Zeref confirms that it's not his doing, and that he is rather confused by all of this. Not that it really shows on his face. Mavis asks what business he has at the guild. Zeref responds with, "What business do you have being alive?" We cut to a forest now with Natsu screaming out, really confused as to what's happened. Turns out he's on top of Lucy with, well, his hands groping Lucy. The two begin to talk, with Natsu not relenting his assault. Lucy recalls being struck by August's magic, and Natsu comments that he negated the attack as it was a heat-type magic, which is why the three of them are alive and well. Noting here that Brandish's own spell on Happy has worn off. Happy wonders why they are where they are and how they got there. Natsu makes a note that he can't smell Brandish or Mest, and he can't feel August's presence, which is probably a good thing, all things considered. Lucy wonders what has happened, and we cut to Grey with Urza sprawled out on the ground, unconscious by the looks of things. Grey comments that the landscape has completely changed, but then wonders if they have been teleported. At this point, Juvia comes up to the pair. She has had no luck in locating Wendy or Carla. Grey decides to tag out to try and find them, seeing as Urza is in no fit state to move. We then cut to Wendy and Carla calling out to Grey, Juvia and Urza, but there's no trace and no scent of them. We cut again to a beach where the guild members who were at the guild hall are now located. None of them have any idea what's going on or why they're even there. Even Kana is there, and like the last 500 times we've seen her, she's yelling out about the first, wondering where Mavis could be. Warren is also confused as he looks at his magic radar to try and determine the location of the group. It's also revealed that Mira and Lizana are both with the rest of the guild as well. Alzak notes that he has spotted the army and they are heading straight for them. Marikov tells them to prepare for battle, and whilst the others are rallying, Warren makes a startling statement. Fior's geography is completely different. We cut across to Brandish and August, the former of whom has used her magic to shrink the wound that she inflicted on August. She questions what he has done and he says it wasn't him. Seems to be a lot of that going around. He states that it is Eileen's compression magic, which Brandish has clearly never heard of. He states that Eileen's magic has changed the shape of Fior. He has deduced that Eileen's goal was to rearrange and move a particular person to a particular place. To move Zeref as close to Fairy Heart as possible. Brandish interprets this as bringing the war to an abrupt end. We cut back to the guild where Mavis and Zeref are having this exact same discussion. Zeref also states that Fior is now 1/20th the size it was before, which is friggin' tiny. Mavis wonders if this was to increase the chance of Fairy Tail running into the Avalreza army, which Zeref confirms. Zeref stands before Mavis, a cruel look on his face, and very happy that he has Fairy Heart in front of him. We get an angry glare from Mavis before we cut to Eileen, sitting on a throne. Eileen can probably sense where Zeref is, considering her comments about the results being favourable. She comments on where the two most powerful pieces are, Acnologia and Zeref, and then wonders where she's ended up. We cut back to Team Natsu, who have discovered buildings from completely different towns to be next to each other. There is narration going on during this portion. With this series, it's usually Lucy narrating, and there's nothing to suggest otherwise. She wonders if what awaits them in this strange land is hope or despair. All the while, the view keeps changing until we are over the form of
Gajeel.
He pulls himself out of what appears to be a stream, commenting that he should be dead. He's cut off, however, as some kind of smoke monster begins to move towards him. Gajeel asks if the smoke is another resident of Hell, and the smoke begins to take form. Gajeel questions who the smoke is, and it takes its full form. The form of Zera, one of the fairies of origin. And we are to be continued in chapter 491, Mother and Child. Alright, so Gajeel and Zera, both characters who have been confirmed at this stage to be dead or damned to the underworld. Zera's return could still be a side effect of Mavis being brought back, but Gajeel, I mean, I'm over the friggin' moon that he's back, but is this even the world of the living? The colours, not that there's any colours, but the tone and the backgrounds that are in place look a little bit off, but that just may be the location that Gajeel has ended up in. I'm really very interested to see what happens with all of this, but we'll just have to wait and see. I have a thought as far as Fairy Heart goes, and it brings me back to the start of the chapter. Zeref believes that Mavis is Fairy Heart, but with the newly revealed Zera, I think she might be Fairy Heart. She's lived on in Mavis's heart, like a fairy, so that stands to reason, but I don't know, it's just a theory at this point. Also, the chapter title of Mother and Child, there is the prevailing theory of Eileen and Urza being connected in this sort of relationship, but this may be another throwaway to Lucy and her mother and their connection as celestial mages, or it could be something to do with dragons. Igneel was Natsu's father, so who knows. There's no other mothers really in this series, and I'm pretty sure the first hasn't had kids, but this may be Mavis as a mother and the guild is her child kind of situation, or Zera swapped out for Mavis. This whole Fairies of Origin business, it might tie to the group that formed Fairy Tail, but it may not. Not really sure how this will play out, seeing as everything has been turned on its head at this point in time, but I guess we'll see next week. I'm Criddle, this has been Chapter 490, Fairy Tail Zero, and I will catch you guys on the flip side.